posted to the county's YouTube channel. Just want to make that clear.
All right, we have Jim Davenport here.
I'm James Davenport. Thank you, John. I'm James Davenport, Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, next person.
Patrick Thompson, member of the committee.
Richard
Okay.
Price, member of the committee.
All right.
Francis Kroll, also member of the committee.
All right.
Herschel Cantor. Oh. Somebody. Herschel Cantor, member of the committee.
All right.
Ronald Becker, member of the committee.
Okay. Okay, any other committee members?
Hello, I couldn't hear. I just joined. What did you say?
Any other committee members? Is that Harvey?
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, any other committee members with us tonight? All right, if not, does that give us a quorum, Pierre?
Yes, you have a quorum.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go around the room with the staff members.
I'm Mike Moon. I'm the COO for DES. I work with Pierre and the team here. Go ahead, Wei.
Okay.
Hi, this is Hui Wang. I'm the DES Deputy Director on Transportation and Development.
All right.
I'll step in. Demetra McBride, Bureau Chief for the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management in DES.
Okay. All right.
Dan,
Next.
I'm the WMATA Service Coordinator.
All right. Thanks, Kirk.
And Ryan Jones, the Art Asset and Project Manager.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Robin McElhenney, the Transit Capital Program Manager.
All right. Thanks, Robin.
Paul Mounier, Art Service Planner.
This is Lauren Breyer, Arlington Transit, Capital Projects Intern.
All right. Okay, any other staff members?
Yeah, this is Edwin Montano, DES Transit Project Manager.
Okay. All right, any other staff? Pierre, did you introduce yourself?
Yes, I did, but I'll introduce myself again.
Okay.
Pierre Hallman, Assistant Transit Bureau Chief.
All right, great. Thanks, Pierre. Okay, now, do we have any members of the public that have joined the meeting?
Good evening, this is Andre Stafford, Metro Bus Planning for Virginia Bus Services.
Okay, Andre. Any members of the public with us tonight?
And good evening. My name is Jiaxin Tong. I'm a friend of the Arlington Transit Advisory Committee.
Okay. We can use all the friends we can get. All right, any other members of the public?
I'm not sure if I count as part of the public, but I'm on a consulting team that's working with the Arlington Transit staff. I'm Carly Macias with HDR.
Okay, we'll consider you a staff.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead and jump in. I'm also a member of the consulting team. This is Mike Schnoldecker with Kimley Horn.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. All right, anybody else on the call here?
There's a gentleman named Matt Edward in the chat who says he's having mic issues, but he's a member of the public.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move to public comment here. Is there anybody that would like to offer some public comment tonight? Okay, anybody? Okay, if not, let's go on to approval of the minutes from the November 15th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification, the minutes have been modified slightly from what you all had received earlier today. It does note that Mr. Davenport was the lead for introductions as well as starting the meeting, just to clarify that.
Okay, thanks, Pierre. All right, so we had a second. Is there any other comment about the minutes? If not, all in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, we'll consider the minutes approved. Okay, the next item that we have here is the Arlington Transit Zero Emissions Bus Study Update. Who's going to present that for us?
Ms. Macias is going to be presenting as she presented to the TAC at the November meeting, and I will let Carly take the floor from here.
Okay, and I'm going to make a suggestion. Since we have some pretty robust topics here, I'm going to suggest that we hold questions to the end. We'll let you get through your presentation, then we'll ask you questions.
Sounds great.
Okay, Carly, thank you.
Thanks. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So most of you, I think, were in the last TAC meeting where we presented kind of some of the initial steps of our project. So this is just a follow-up on some of the progress that we've made since then. So this is the study scope and timeline, just a few of the elements that we're looking at, so this should be familiar to you all. The only change that we've had in our timeline is to add in that note about the DRPT application deadline, which is February 1st. And so we will have some content that relates to that. But hopefully you all, I think, will get a copy of this so you can look a little bit further on that. But I want to make sure I can get through all the content. So just a little bit more of a recap. In the last meeting, we gave a bit of an overview on zero emission bus technology, some of the benefits and challenges of the two different types of zero emission buses, so battery electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. We talked about the different types of charging. So you have the slow depot charging or the fast conductive charging that you can do en route. We talked about different hydrogen fuel sources and some of the programs that DOE is investing in. We also looked at emissions comparisons by vehicle type, and we've actually built upon that in this presentation. So you'll see a little bit more of that. And then finally, we talked about some of the route modeling that we've been doing and the facility assessment that's been done. And so today you'll be seeing a little bit more of the outputs from that route modeling. So this zero emission bus transition plan is really kind of cut up into 3 different stages. Phase 1 and 2 are really more of the near term, and then phase 3 is kind of determining that long range strategy. So I go into detail about each of these phases in the next slides. So the first phase is really the focus is in 2023 replacing the aging NABI buses. I think we talked about this quite a bit in our last presentation, but there's a fleet of NABI buses that are no longer serving the needs for Arlington Transit to keep up that quality service, and they really need to be replaced as soon as possible. And the quickest way to replace these buses is to purchase 15 CNG buses. Unfortunately, the timeline for purchasing zero emission buses doesn't really work. The lead time for ordering those buses is about 2 years, and the new AOMF facility won't be ready to charge these vehicles until 2025. So this first phase is really focused on getting those old NABI buses off the road and replacing them with new CNG buses. There is a lot of optimism about being able to fuel these CNG buses with renewable natural gas. We are still, or Arlington staff are still in conversations about getting access to that RNG, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. As the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant comes online in 2029, there will be a greater source of RNG at that point. So phase 2 is focused on conducting a zero emission bus pilot program. So this will include testing out both battery electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell buses. So the plan is to pilot the first 4, which would be battery electric buses, in 2025. And really the goal around that is to have those buses go in service as the AOMF facility is prepared to charge those electric buses. The following year, between 2 and 4 fuel cell electric buses will be purchased and deployed in that year. And this will really allow Arlington staff to do a side-by-side evaluation to compare these two technologies head-to-head. Most agencies across the country we're seeing are really testing out both technologies. Every agency is a little bit different. It's important to see how these buses operate in your climate, in your service, at your facilities. So getting that hands-on real-world experience is really important. So this is the second phase of the zero emission bus plan. So the third phase is really going to build off of the results of that pilot program. So based on how it goes and how that real world experience really influences decision making, Arlington will kind of go down one of 2 paths. So that we're going to have, and we'll show you a bit more of this in the following slides, but there's basically a battery electric bus scenario and a hydrogen fuel cell bus scenario. And based on the pilot, Arlington will likely go down one of those paths. It is possible to have a fleet that includes both bus types, but most agencies are kind of choosing one or the other just to limit the different kinds of buses and all the infrastructure that they require. So for battery electric buses, we are assuming a 2-to-1 replacement ratio. So for every CNG bus you retire, you purchase 2 battery electric buses. The purpose of that is really to maintain ultimate flexibility. So instead of tailoring all of your bus assignments and routes to fit the technology, you're just able to send out those buses as needed on any route at any time. It is possible to reduce that ratio through different means, by maybe adjusting your scheduling, by kind of buying different buses that fit different types of service. And we are seeing that with technological advancements, we do expect that ratio to come down. But for now, we are just kind of doing our planning based on what is on the market today and what's available to us. For hydrogen fuel cell buses, you do get a 1-for-1 replacement ratio because they do have quite a bit more range, as we talked about in the November presentation. So in order to do that fuel cell electric bus scenario, it will be important to continue having those conversations with Washington Gas in order to make sure that you do have a source of green hydrogen in order to fuel those hydrogen fuel cell buses. Which I think we might talk a little bit more about that later. So going into the 2 scenarios, I did first want to highlight on the right the timeline that we have. So as I mentioned, starting in 2023, there will be another purchase of CNG buses, but all of the CNG buses going forward will be fueled with RNG. So as you procure more buses, those buses will be fueled with renewable natural gas. There's an asterisk there just because this assumption is pending successful negotiations with Clean Energy, which is a renewable natural gas provider. But there is a lot of expectation that this will be possible. And so if you see on the chart there that dark orange is the CNG fueled buses and the light orange is RNG. So between 23 and 28 is when it's most challenging to find a source of RNG. But starting in 29, that water treatment plant will be online and providing RNG. So all the buses will be fueled with that RNG. So in 2025 and 26, you see the zero emission buses that will be deployed as part of the pilot program, which I described before. In 28, ART will no longer purchase natural gas vehicles. So all of the vehicles after that point will be zero emission buses. So it'll take a while to retire those CNG buses, but starting in 28, all of the new purchases will be zero emission buses. Starting in 29, as I mentioned, all of the CNG buses will be fueled with RNG. And by 2038, the fleet will be 100% zero emission. So looking at the chart on the left, this is specifically the battery electric bus scenario. I will say the timeline on the right is the same for the next couple slides as well. So the biggest thing I wanted to point out here is you can see that black dotted line is the facilities capacity. And starting in 2031, you do see that the 2-to-1 replacement ratio does exceed the facility capacity. So that at this point, you would need to have another facility where you could store and maintain those buses. So that's the biggest challenge with battery electric buses. We are expecting, technological advancements could help push that timeline, but we do expect at some point that going with the battery electric bus scenario would result in needing more facility space. It's just kind of a matter of time. So that is our assumption for the battery electric bus scenario. So the fuel cell electric bus scenario, again, all of the timelines on the right are the same. The biggest difference, as you can see, is that 1-to-1 replacement ratio really helps you in terms of the facility capacity. And this actually doesn't include any assumptions around service expansion. So it's important to note that this scenario does help you save on space just because of the lack of the need to increase the size of the fleet. So this is just a helpful side-by-side to see the two scenarios and how they compare. So last time we talked a little bit about greenhouse gas emissions, and we looked at it kind of at a point where the whole fleet would be zero emission. But this chart actually shows you kind of tracking the greenhouse gas emissions as you go through your transition. So you can see the green line is the battery electric bus scenario, and the blue line is the fuel cell electric bus scenario. You see a pretty steep dip in 2029, and that's really because you're switching all of your CNG buses to be fueled by RNG, which has a negative carbon intensity. So that really helps a lot in reducing the GHG emissions from the fleet. You do see a slight uptick after that point. As you adopt more electric buses, you do have a slight increase in GHG emissions because the electrical grid is not 100% renewable yet. Dominion isn't projecting that will happen until 2050. So you can see it kind of goes back down again. Obviously, there are different factors that could affect, this line and how that works. If you decide to purchase solar energy from a different source, then that would be lower. And then for that blue line, you do see a bit of an uptick there, but it does level out at 0, and we are assuming green hydrogen for that. So that's hydrogen generated with renewable sources. This next chart looks at kind of those other types of emissions beyond greenhouse gas emissions, so carbon monoxide, VOCs, NOx, particulate matter, and things like that. So for both scenarios, as you transition to a zero emission fleet, you end up with 0 tailpipe emissions. So most of those emissions go down to 0. I will say the weird part about particulate matter is that you can't completely get rid of your PM emissions. And part of that is because Arlington has already converted from diesel buses to CNG, which you see a huge drop in particulate matter emissions just for making that transition. But there are a certain amount of particulate matter emissions from just running a bus, from tires on the road and brake pads and things like that. But it is pretty minimal. So all those other emissions will go down to zero except for particulate matter. Next, I wasn't clear. Am I passing this over to Mike Moon or am I presenting this?
Hey, Carly, I could take it. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so thanks, Carly. I think because RNG, as Carly has shown you, renewable natural gas is a component of our fleet transition plan that she's shown you both in the battery electric bus or the hydrogen fuel cell scenarios. We wanted to just give you 2 slides. We're not going to make you drill down too far on this, but wanted to just frame this for you. Our water pollution control plant that's on Glebe Road is our only wastewater facility in the county, and we wanted to just note to you that there's a significant upgrade project. It's called our Solids Master Plan. It's currently under design, and there's a holistic process being designed in this, and that they would take the normal wastewater, the solids from the plant, and through a process, thermal hydrolysis, but primarily the anaerobic digestion process. There is a gas, 2 products actually formed here. One would be a solid, and you could use that for different purposes. There's been consideration of fertilizer, et cetera, but also a soil amendment that could be used. But the thing we're focusing on here is up in the middle of the screen. The gas is a byproduct of the anaerobic digestion process, and it can provide a renewable natural gas source to provide for the ART fleet. So wanted to highlight that, and just note that one of the other benefits here is that it's all internal to Arlington County. So it's the process both starts and would end in the county, which I think we really like that aspect of this. Next slide. And so this is slide provides a quick look down into the process, which I'm not going to go over in too much detail, but just to describe that this is the conditioning and cleaning process from left to right. There's a couple of things I would point out here in the process. It is the process, though, whereby you clean the gas and can provide it to either the gas distribution system through an injection, or use it for the ART fleet or even the Metro fleet that's in close proximity to the plant. The renewable natural gas is currently planned to be online in 2029, as Carly has noted. In the interim, the transit team is working with our current vendor at the light maintenance facility, Clean Energy, and we're in negotiations to try to secure a renewable natural gas resource that could provide that in the interim, starting as early as 2023. And we think the prospect of that is very high to get that and be able to just represent that the ART fleet is being run by a renewable natural gas product. I would note this is a closed system. And as you look from the very top, what we had titled exhaust, there is no methane, CH4, that's exhausted, which is a gas that's very high in greenhouse gas emission. And lastly, 2 points I would note for the renewable natural gas. It has a huge greenhouse gas emission offset because it's produced by a natural decaying process of organic material, the waste that's produced in the sanitary sewer process, and it would otherwise end up in the atmosphere from natural processes. So it's a biogenic gas, which you can use as a significant offset in the calculation of your greenhouse gas emissions. And then secondly, something to recognize here is that what's produced here is 2 things. There's actually a commodity component of natural gas, and also there's a renewable identification instrument that's actually used by the EPA to track the program, and it's used to track and enforce the renewable fuel standards that gas suppliers and fuel suppliers of gasoline, diesel, and other fuel supplies have to use to demonstrate compliance with the Energy Policy Act. So I just wanted to note those couple of issues. It's really we're very excited about the prospect of getting this internal from a process that the county is already having to deal with their waste water system management of their solids program, and this is really a benefit that we can realize in the long term, 2029, but in the interim by negotiating with a gas provider. Next slide. So I'm just going to wrap here and just note that there's a couple of actions. Art will be, the actions here that are on top of us in the short term are, Art will be applying for 15 CNG buses and 4 electric buses in the February 1st application to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Pierre Holloman and his team in transit are working right now to get those applications ready for submission. And these purchases are critical, not just to replace the fleet, but in the aspect of maintaining pullout because of the nabbies that Pierre Holloman mentioned to you last time. We really have to replace those buses. They cannot be maintained because they're no longer, the parts are not reliable. We're spending a significant amount of money, almost 9 to 10 times the amount as we typically would spend on a bus just to operate and keep it in service. So that's the plan in the short term. And it really allows us to continue a service that frankly is very beneficial to our transit dependent riders in the county. And so the public engagement process is noted below. We're already in this process. Meeting with you tonight, we briefed the TC chair and the C2E2 chair earlier this afternoon, and we plan on having those additional meetings as noted there. So really with that, we really have learned a lot in this process, though I would just give a lot of credit for the transit team working collaboratively with Demetri McBride and the air team, because frankly, there's a lot we've benchmarked in the country nationally with the help of Washington Gas and Carly transit properties throughout the country and what they're doing to really do some lessons learned so that we don't have to make similar mistakes that perhaps others have already experienced. I thought it was valuable if Pierre Holloman can just give us a 1-minute snapshot of the regional practices or regional status, if you would, of what some of the other transit properties are doing in the region. If you could take that, Pierre.
Okay, as many of you probably already know, City of Alexandria Dash has done BEB pallets with Proterra as well as New Flyer. They're going through the process of looking at charging and how to keep the buses in terms of range. DC Circulator also have done the pallet with battery electric buses. And more recently, Montgomery County has announced that they are about to start their hydrogen fuel cell pilot, which is pretty exciting. But there's a lot of things happening throughout the region, and in the lieu of time, I would just like to pass this on to the chair, Mr. Carton.
Okay, thanks, Pierre.
Yeah,
and thanks for this very comprehensive presentation. Now, if folks have questions, why don't you raise your hand and we'll pull them out of the chat there. As I mentioned, we've got a full agenda tonight, but we do have time for a few questions here. So just raise your hand if you have a question. I'm having trouble believing there's no questions here. Okay, Ronald?
Yeah, just a question about the new CNG buses. What's one cost and who makes them? Who are the manufacturers? Is there much choice of manufacturers? And secondly, is there a way to do cooperative purchasing? We're not a purchasing committee, but and I know that there is a purchasing department, but is there a way to cooperate with other systems in getting maybe cheaper buses? So what do they cost? Who makes them, and can you cooperate?
Yeah, Pierre, you want to? We're writing contracts of other entities, but I think Pierre can handle that question. Go ahead, Pierre.
Yeah. So the average cost of a CNG is about $550,000, and we do not do our own contracting. We've always ridden other contracts, such as the state's contract or the WMATA's contract, because of the economies of scale. We get better pricing.
Good.
Okay, and I'm going to make one request here, and that is if you're not talking, turn your camera off. And secondly, the questions I'm asking for we're going to limit those to the committee right now. So I'm going to call on Richard Price.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you talked about the replacement, a 2-to-1 replacement for a battery electric and then 1-to-1 on the fuel cell. There was no mention about the cost of retrofitting any of our facilities for either battery electric or fuel cell? Can there be sort of, I mean, 2-to-1 replacement value for a battery electric seems that's going to be an ungodly expensive purchase, but for a fuel cell, I mean, can we talk about the expense of retrofitting any of our facilities for it? Because I mean, that has to be factored into the costs, correct?
Yeah, I would just, I think it's a great question, great point. I would just say for what we've proposed with the pilots for hydrogen fuel cell, we've been coordinating closely with Washington Gas. We feel like for the 2 to 4 bus hydrogen fuel cell pilot, we can do that with tractor trailer fueling rigs that could minimize the cost of infrastructure for the pilot. However, if we were to make the decision down the road to go to that technology fully, we would have to retrofit fueling supply and storage tanks on site, which would be a significant facility investment. But with that said, also the BEB investment at the AOMF facility that you may have been briefed on last time is a significant. I mean, we're I think in the order of $9 to $10 million of investment in that area for BEB buses, but that's the full electrification of all 63 vehicles on the site. So I would say what this does allow us for in the pilot is we would be able to do the 4-bus BEB pilot and install the infrastructure, do the distribution system upgrades. And there is higher levels of cost there. I would just tell you for full electrification at that facility and all the infrastructure cost, it was estimated in the $9 to $10 million range for 63 buses. So that kind of gives you a little context. But I do think one thing that might be helpful too is just a basic fact. Pierre, you gave the $550,000 number for CNG. Could you give the corresponding number for a BEB?
Sure. So BEB without charging infrastructure is running about $900,000 to $1 million. The charging infrastructure runs about $150,000 to $200,000.
Yeah, and hydrogen fuel cell buses are in that same ballpark. So the bus itself is, but we don't have. I tell you, at this point, we have not done the cost takeoff or even the design for a full-fledged hydrogen fuel cell investment of infrastructure. But both will take investments. So I think it's a great question.
Well, I mean, I'm also a member of the Transportation Commission, and if you're going to be coming and briefing the commission, I would highly recommend that you have at least, estimates of what the costs are for a full replacement. I mean, you said that the replacement is going to occur by 2038. That's not far away. So, I mean, I would definitely recommend that you have those kind of estimates. And just one last point, I saw in the chat, someone took offense to the use of the word transit dependent. I would highly encourage you that, hey, I'm also I love transit and I use transit all the time. I'm not transit dependent, but I use transit. So I would highly recommend not using that phrase going forward. So thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I just say by we don't really have a design to estimate on, but we could give you parametric estimates for some of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other committees from, any questions from committee members? Any other ones? Okay. Okay. Harvey, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera off for me. Okay. With that said, I want to thank you both for excellent presentation. As we can see, there's a lot of moving parts to this and a lot of options and so forth, but glad to see that we're moving ahead on replacing those navies as promptly as possible. So thank you both for joining us tonight.
Great,
So
thank you.
Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing from you again soon too. So let's go ahead to our next item, which is the Arlington Transit Strategic Plan update.
Good evening.
Okay, hopefully all of you had a chance to take a look at the presentation that was sent to us earlier today. It's a pretty long presentation. I'm going to ask Paul to get through it as quickly as you can. And again, we're going to hold questions to the end.
Absolutely. I will move through this very quickly, and we can go back and address any questions in more detail. But as you noted, this is a rather lengthy presentation. Just to frame everything we're doing, our Transit Bureau vision and mission, kind of the guiding principle that we work from. This is the schedule of upcoming events. Today, we're here talking to the Transit Committee. We joined the C2E2 group next week to speak with them. Then going to the board, the county administrator and the board to get direction on how we are going to proceed with recommendations. Today, we're going to talk about gap analysis and some of the gaps in the county. Go into a few other committees, commissions. The technical memo on recommendations will be coming out in March, and that will be synced with the Metro Bus bus plan that they're doing. We'll be taking those recommendations out to the public, drafting the report, and having it approved in June. Little just summary of our outreach. There was online feedback that we had, and we had 7 pop-up engagements throughout the county. Through the public engagement, we had goals and goals that we wanted the public to comment on to make sure that we were moving in the right direction. I want to note that the goals for deploying infrastructure and services equitably and creating a resilient community through sustainable transportation, our equity and sustainability goals were the highest agreement of people that strongly agree. But even the other goals, very high, strongly agree with those goals, well over 70% for all our goals. So it appears we are on the right track with our goal setting. Public engagement questionnaire essentially asks some very general questions about what is most important to you when you choose transit, frequency being the highest thing that people identified as important to them as they use transit. And you can see the other answers and the percentages associated. And then the biggest challenge when you use transit. What is preventing you from taking transit? Again, frequency, very high on this. Also, what rose to the top is doesn't come at the time I need. Typically, this is talking about, later evening weekend services that aren't run quite as much when people have shift work and things of that nature, then they don't have the opportunity to use transit for those trips, or recreational or leisure activities. If you don't aren't running the system at the time of those, it's difficult to use transit for those trips. So now let's talk about the system-wide gaps we identified through the outreach and analysis. First thing I want to talk about is our networks. We talk about these a little bit in the gap analysis, understanding the way that we provide service. We have a premium transit network, high frequency with premium type infrastructure, something you can see along Metroway or Columbia Pike. Our primary network, which is a high frequency network. An example of that is along Langston Boulevard. These are all day routes, long span of service, which means how long they run, 18 hours, and high frequencies. And then the secondary transit network, lower frequencies, less span of service, typically used for coverage and commuter routes. Coverage meaning going to places where that are away from the high frequency network, where you have the regional bus service and ART service supplementing the regional network. This is more neighborhood type service, commuter type service, trying to feed the high frequency networks, typically less ridership and lower frequencies. Getting into the gaps, as I noted in the public engagement, frequency was the #1 priority. It's important. It requires less planning for your bus trip, lower time penalty for missing bus. If you have a bus coming every 10 minutes and you miss it by a few minutes, and there's another bus in 10 minutes. If you get a bus coming every 30 minutes, that's a little more difficult. And then some recommendations on potential recommendations. Again, we're just talking about the gaps right now and the potential recommendations for addressing those gaps and needs in a very general sense. A lot of it has to do with investment into the service and determining where our priority for investment is. Increasing span of service. Another thing that was rated very highly, particularly as a challenge for people using transit, not coming during the time of day when they need it. Again, speaking of people that have shift work and people who want to use the service for leisure activities that would be on the weekend or in the evenings. This is also something that has been talked about frequently in the industry with the changes in working, with the increases in working at home and teleworking and less people commuting. The off peaks are becoming a more important part of the service, whereas the peak used to dominate. We are looking at the off peak service, which seem to be more resilient, and looking at ways that we can possibly improve those. Again, some advantages, off-peak employment opportunities, access to education opportunities, and then the recommendations, which again, you're looking at investments. Improve reliability. This is something that is, extremely important. You have to have a trustworthy system. People need to be able to know when they plan a trip, when they go to their bus stop, the bus stop's going to be there, and the bus is going to be there. And it's going to be able to take them to their destination on time so that they can trust that service just as much as if you wanted to get in your car, your car's there, you can get in it and take it, and that would be reliable. And that's very important. And it's something that we are looking at. Part of it right now is making sure we have a well-maintained fleet, making sure we're training our drivers, but also we can look into planning shorter routes, more direct routes, improving transit infrastructure like transit single priority, and investing in new buses and increasing investment in the maintenance of our fleet. Create a more efficient transit network design. There were some identified gaps in connectivity to and from destinations. We've been doing analysis on the new travel patterns, also population growth, job center growth, et cetera. And the Amazon HQ as an example of a significant job growth location. Some of our performance measures are not reaching the level that they need to reach. They were designed before pre-pandemic, many years before pre-pandemic, and we don't currently meet those. We're slowly building back the ridership and getting closer to that. But one of the things we want to do is potentially review and adjust our service standards to identify better times of the day, making sure that we're providing the service at the frequency that needs to be, and making sure it fits with the needs of the community. You can do some things like limiting bus stops along routes, but that's a trade-off, and you don't have as easy access to the bus, and some ideas for investments. Better accuracy and access to real-time data. This was a recurring theme. We have had some problems with our software system. We're working on cleaning that up. I know Metrobus also had problems with this, what are called ghost buses, when the real time says, oh, you have your bus coming in 2 minutes, and you go to the bus stop, and then all of a sudden it switches over and says, no, the bus is coming in 30 minutes. It's a way that the real time interacts. If a bus goes off route, if it gets disconnected, it reverts to a scheduled time and not a real time. and doesn't actually show what the bus is doing. So this is something that we're working on addressing right now. One of the other main things that we need to do is it goes back to reliability, making sure our fleet is in the best condition it can be. Our operators understand how to follow the schedule so they aren't coming early and leaving early from stops, and staying on time. This was it's very important things, particularly the way people interact now with bus service. They're depending more on real-time data and less on a schedule. Improve the rider experience on board and at waiting areas. It's very important to adults or elderly, having patience. When we did our outreach, I just spoke with communities of populations with older adults in it, and this is a lot to do with just customer service in general. Bus drivers having patience, bus drivers lowering the ramp and kneeling the bus when they are asked to, which is, what they're expected to do, and things of that nature. Also related to this is safety. Customer safety is very important. If you can't deliver a safe service, there's no reason you should be running service. This is a key piece of what we do, and making sure bus stops are accessible. We have a program to improve bus stops, and the goal was to have 100% 88 bus stops countywide, and we've continued to work through that year over year, and hope to meet that goal sooner than later. But as we do that, it also becomes more comfortable and more accessible for the public in general, not just people who have potentially mobility issues, but for the greater population. Address underserved or low-income minority groups. Again, as I mentioned, our goals, one of the goals that was most strongly agreed to was the providing equitable service countywide, equitable service and capital improvements countywide. We will have an update of our Title VI plan coming up in October of this year. That's one of the things that is coming up, and we will be taking a look at our equity program through that. One of the things that I think is exceptionally important, and it was something that I was a little surprised by, that I heard more than once or many times while I was out in the field, was that we're not communicating well with our customers, particularly not providing enough translation service, even in Spanish, even though I know that we provide everything that we put out in English and Spanish, but apparently that isn't reaching the customer the way we want it to. And it's something that I think we need to really concentrate on as we update our Title VI, is our public participation plan and our ongoing communication with LEP communities. Increase attractiveness of transit. A general idea of, sometimes there is a little bit of a bias against bus transit. Some people may not look at it as favorable as other transportation options. We want to make sure that people understand that transit is reliable, it's convenient, and it's feasible to make your trips with transit. And I think that is something that we need to make sure that people understand. One of the most important things we can do for a positive environmental impact is increase the number of people that are on the bus and decrease the number of single occupancy vehicles on the street. And so again, just overall increasing the attractiveness of transit, increasing the number of people who view it as a viable and feasible alternative to using SOVs. Consider more affordable or free transit services. As you're aware, agencies have been exploring this moving forward as transit as a service. providing that free. We are currently in the process of providing reduced fares and free fares to low income and students. These are pilots that we have right now. We will be looking to do a study on free or reduced fare transit and seeing where what would be the best way to handle that? Do we make this free for everyone? Do we make do we reduce the fare, provide free fares for lower income populations while still asking people who can pay for the service to continue paying for the service? So looking forward to that as an idea to help increase the ridership on the bus. Enhance bus roadway infrastructure for service. This really talks about spot improvements, working with our engineering groups when there's a transportation project, making sure that we're looking at things like, is there a possibility to put in a bus lane or a queue jump or some other infrastructure that works within within the scope of the project to help increase the reliability and speed of transit. There's limited right-of-way that is in the county, and there's a lot of different modes that are sharing that right-of-way at this point. And one of the things we want to do is make sure that we are looking at transit and making sure that we can propose things to help that service with infrastructure along with the other modes. Geographic patterns. So looking at the county from a geographic point of view, these orange and brown locations here are COG activity centers. NWCOG has identified these, and I think it was 2014, as activity centers. There's regional-wide activity centers, and these are the ones that are in Arlington. The green spaces or neighborhoods, we identified these as essentially our internal activity centers to help with the analysis, something that would match with what COG was doing in these TAZ, based on traffic analysis zones, which they do a lot of their analysis from. So creating these green sections so that we had some way to look at the county as a whole and not just the activity centers and the connections between activity centers and these neighborhoods. Through some analysis, we found some areas that we would like to focus on along Columbia Pike. First off, our equity areas along Columbia Pike, Crystal City, Long Branch Creek, and US 29 near Washington Boulevard and Washington Boulevard. Transit-oriented population propensity focus areas. Transit-oriented population propensity is based on a few different metrics. It has equity focus, but it also looks at densities, and it looks at zero vehicle houses. In some case, that is because people choose not to have a vehicle. In other cases, people don't have the opportunity to have a vehicle, but it does increase the population, the transit-oriented propensity with those factors included. So these were some of the areas that the propensity analysis identified. Again, Crystal City, Pentagon City. So looking at our equity population as identified by our Title VI, you can see the areas that are identified by as low income or minority neighborhoods, and where there is a higher population of people in these equity populations with a lower than average ratio of transit trips, meaning that there are less transit trips on average when you talk about a ratio for people in the equity populations than in other parts of the county. When you look at that with WMATA and ART combined, you can see that it does change the map. Columbia Pike being one of our premium transit network corridors, we do have a lot of regional service. So when you layer in Metro and ART together, you can see that there is a lot of service in these areas, and that goes in here where the Metroway comes through and along Columbia Pike. It still does provide some ideas, and there's a lot of maps like this that we use to overlay and start trying to identify where there are gaps, where these locations show up on multiple maps. So we had several maps like that, bivariate maps showing ART and WMATA service, ART alone and WMATA and ART service combined. And we compared it to these other factors and built up, where we found opportunities for improvement of transit. And again, you can see Crystal City, Arlington Mill, Long Branch, Buckingham, and Waverly Hills. We also looked at our transit centers and just the level of service at our transit centers in general. Interesting that we look at Arlington Cemetery and Washington National Airport with no bus service. And while those are, transit centers with rail, there is reasons that you probably don't have as much bus service there. It is served by rail, and bus service may not be the best option for providing service to those areas, but it's something that we note and we would take a look at. You can see that Boston Metro is above average trips per day with 2,000 when you combine WMATA and ART, and Courthouse obviously the highest center for ART service alone. Another interesting thing, below average levels of service at transit centers, Pentagon City, Crystal City, Metro rail stations. A little bit counterintuitive. You would say, oh, well, these are major Metro stations. But the thing is, we do have a lot of Metro bus regional service that goes to these stations. So that we don't have to layer as much ART service over it. I think there's only one route that even goes to the Pentagon. So a lot of that service is carried by Metro and the regional bus network. And then the activity centers, again, summarizing the activity centers, Courthouse remaining the highest with 1,400 trips per day. Virginia Square rising to the top here with the most service in general. And this is the activity center, not necessarily the station itself. And again, you see below service activity centers such as Pentagon City, Sterlington, and Falls Church, again, served by a lot of regional bus service. So it seems a little counterintuitive that we don't have a lot of ART service there, but it really not necessary to lay over ART service over the top of that. This is showing connections from all the activity centers and neighborhoods with the thicker line, meaning there's a stronger connection with more trips. These connections come from what is called streetlight data. It's essentially anonymous phone data that is collected to tell us where people are traveling. It's so streetlight, I think, is the brand name, but it's also called replica, is I believe what we use. But you can see all the connections for all types of trips, and then you can see the connections for just transit, where you see a much more robust connections down here in the southern part of Arlington, south of 66. And essentially what this tells us is that what the ratio of transit trips is to the total trips. And in the lower ratios are where you have fewer transit trips, but a lot of people that are making that trip in ways obviously other than transit. It includes transit, but there are more trips than transit trips, and these could be opportunities to build connections. This is just another element that we can layer on top of all the other analysis that we were looking at to say, okay, we have gaps in these locations. We have a gap with this connection. Is there a way that we can connect these locations with service? So this is just another tool that just lets us know where we have some opportunity to provide some transit service if we can find a way to fill other gaps at the same time. We looked at schools, and I'll move quickly through this. We looked at schools, our Arlington Public Schools and the higher learning universities, and then, charted the trips that we had for that and seeing where there could be an opportunity for improvement. We've looked at community centers, again, charting the amount of trips that go to these community centers and seeing where we may be able to increase that service and bridge some gaps. Again, another layer of information to put on to see where we have opportunities to fill gaps. So the next steps are going to be the service recommendations. We're going to get comment on this. You've seen what we are talking about doing, but we're going to review our performance measures and then start looking at the gaps and providing specific improvements, routing, hours, frequencies to address these gaps. And then we will come back and talk to this group a little bit, talk to a few other groups, and then take this out to the public to make sure that we are providing the right recommendations for filling these gaps. Once that is complete, we will develop a funding plan. We will be talking about funding with our service recommendations, but this will be less constrained financially. When we come to the full plan, we may have to make some trade-offs, and this will be a constrained, feasible, implementable plan. So, we want to get a lot of ideas out here with the recommendations, of the specific recommendations with the costs associated, and then turning that into a feasible plan and that can be implemented. And then the final recommendations and submission of the plan, approval by the board in June. And what we're trying to figure out right now is what gaps are we prioritizing and what investments do we need to prioritize. And that is where we are. And if there are questions or if we want to go back and look at anything, please let me know.
Well, Paul, you basically used up all the time for this item.
I apologize.
But I know it was very comprehensive. When do you plan to bring it back to us?
It will be end of February, near the beginning of March, and we're going to have, more specific recommendations. Like I said, this was a gap analysis looking at where our needs are, and then the next is to start making the specific recommendations for service.
Okay, all right. As I said, you did use up all the time, so I'm going to suggest if people have questions that they email them to Paul, or you can send them to Pierre if you don't have Paul's email. But I think we probably need to move on at this point. So the next item is the WMATA 2024 proposed budget update.
This is Kirk. I'm getting the screen up.
Okay.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So my name's Kirk Dand. I work for Arlington County's Transit Bureau as the Arlington County WMATA Service Coordinator. So the proposed operating budget increases bus and rail service, simplifies fares, launches the Better Bus Network redesign, and funds crisis intervention specialists. The proposed capital budget funds zero-emission buses and electrification of the Northern and Bladensburg bus garages. It opens the new Potomac Yard Station, modernizes customer wayfinding, and funds the creation of the Metro Integrated Comms Center. The proposed FY 2024 operating budget includes revenue of $509 million, expenses of $2,322 million, a total subsidy of $1,252 million, and $561 million of American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA, relief funding. The proposed budget increases bus and rail service, simplifies fares, funds crisis intervention specialists, and customer liaisons. Initially, Metro anticipated an FY24 budget gap of $184.7 million. Metro expects to realize management savings from cost-cutting initiatives totaling $10 million, including $7 million from operating efficiencies and $3 million of vacancy cost reductions. In addition, the FY24 budget includes revenue growth of $28.5 million, including $11.4 million of fare revenue from improving ridership and $3 million from parking and advertising revenues, as well as $14.1 million from joint development revenues. These initiatives reduce the shortfall to $146.2 million. The remainder of the budget will be balanced with fair revenue and increased infrastructure investment and Jobs Act, known as IIJA, which is federal formula funding for preventive maintenance. This slide shows you when and how the federal funds were used. As you can see in FY25, there will be no funds remaining. Building on the all-day service improvements introduced in fall of 2021, which upgraded 20 bus lines to every 12-minute frequency all day and 16 bus lines to every 20-minute frequency all day, the proposal includes improvements to 3 bus lines to increase frequency and expand access. The B2 line frequency would be increased to 12 minutes all day. The A12 line would be restructured and extended into 2 routes connecting to downtown Largo and New Carrollton, both operating every 20 minutes. And the 16M service would be a restructuring of the existing 16G and H service, connecting Skyline to Crystal City every 12 minutes all day. The proposal increases service frequency with trains every 3 to 6 minutes at stations in the core and trains every 8 to 12 minutes or better system-wide, benefiting customers across the entire network. Green and yellow line trains would arrive every 6 minutes all day, with the yellow line trains turning around at Mount Vernon Square Station. The orange line trains would operate every 7.5 minutes on average during peak service and every 10 minutes during off-peak service. This slide shows you all of the service changes and improved frequency all in one place. Simplified rail fares. The FY24 fare optimization proposal simplifies the Metro Rail fare structure for customers, grows riderships and revenue, and makes transit more affordable for most price-sensitive customers. The proposed rail fare structure ranges from $2 to $6.50 for weekdays and maintains the $2 late night and weekend fares. Weekday peak and off-peak fare structure would be consolidated. The mileage rate would be standardized at 40 cents per mile after 3 miles. The rail base fare would match the bus base fare of $2 all week. and Metro would administer a regional low-income fare program. This fare simplification offers advantages over a general across-the-board fare increase by growing ridership while maintaining a positive budget impact. The proposed low-income fare program would provide customers enrolled in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, would give them a 50% discount on trips, like the senior and disabled reduced fares do currently. This slide shows the different service and fare optimization data as it applies to the budget. It shows how many people would be affected as well as the cost to the budget. And it, as you can see, it saves 17.2 million. Capital programs has not changed. It's still state of good repair, bringing stuff up to a modernization, keeping things status quo and better than status quo. The monies that it costs to do capital investments was not affected by the ridership as operating had been. So nothing really has changed there. The funding sources, for the most part, stay the same. We got PREA, so we're good there. The overdue needs are listed on this, looking at the improvements and getting stuff up to a state of good repair. What's going to happen is at the last board meeting last Thursday, the GM's proposed budget was approved to be taken to the board meeting, which is next week, by the finance committee, and that will they will then on next Thursday's meeting vote to allow them to take this budget to the public feedback and public hearing sessions. This is the same as it has been in the past, but hopefully improved, where they get the public's input on what they think about the budget and different ideas that the public might have and how to make this a better system. And the way that they're going to do that is through in-person outreach, where they send crews out to the stations and bus transfer facilities. There'll be notices on the digital signs throughout the Metro system. There'll be ads placed on social media and in publications. We're going to have public hearings. They are due to be scheduled, assuming that it is approved next Thursday. They're due to be scheduled for the second week in March. And there'll be a survey that people can take. The website will be updated with information. There'll be brochures to be handed out, and stakeholders such as Arlington County, Fairfax County, etc., will all have their PIOs informed on what the information is, so we can get it out to the public. And these will be in multilingual documents. The next steps, right now, we need to, the past steps are in gray, the present and the upcoming steps are in blue. So on next Thursday, the 26th, the board will vote to put this information forth to public comment and public hearing. The public comment period will be from the middle of February to the middle of March. And the public hearings will occur, as I said, in the second week of March. There'll be workshops so that people know what's up. Once everything has gone through its motions, we've received all the information from the public and compiled that information. It will then be presented to the board for board adoption, hopefully in April. They will then submit the paperwork that they need to the feds, and then FY24 starts bright and early the 1st of July. And that's my last slide.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. 2 questions for you. When's the Potomac Yard Station open up?
May.
May, okay. Let's see. The other question I had was how much of I've heard that DC is planning to have free Metro bus, and I just wondered how that weighs into the budget here.
So the politicians of DC put forth that they want to have free bus and they want to pay for it. Right now, to date, nothing official has been worked out with WMATA in order to get that done. The plan is that the district would pay a sum that they believe is the amount of the revenue that would be otherwise taken in by riders. Those the trips would be any trip that is, as of right now anyway, it would be any trip that originates in DC. So if I was to ride from Arlington to DC, I would pay. But if I ride from DC to Arlington, that trip would be free on bus. Now, one of the things that I don't think that the district has really taken into account is how many people that are not residents of the district ride on Metro bus. Additionally, they are not necessarily tallying all the people who in the past have kind of ridden on fare evasion. So the amount of money could be a lot more than what they have set aside in their alleged slush funds that was going to pay for this. Right now, that amount is at the desk of the mayor. However, if all things were equal, right now it would be a cost neutral type of thing, because it would be along the lines of what we do with the student fares in Arlington, where the students are riding free. It would be the amount of rides would be paid for by the jurisdiction. So the district would be paying for it, and it would not affect the budget at all.
Okay. All right. Now, we're out of time here, but is there another quick question for Kirk? Okay, if not, we'll move ahead. So next item is a report from the Accessibility Subcommittee. And I'm going to suggest Harvey turn his camera off, but I'm not sure he knows how to do it. So who's reporting for the Accessibility Subcommittee tonight? Do you know, Pierre?
Mr. Chair, Laura McNeil has her hand up.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, Laura.
If you're speaking, you're on mute, Laura.
And once you turn your camera on too, Laura.
We don't have a report to deliver tonight. We're going to be meeting next week.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other comments you have from the subcommittee? Just that your meeting's next week?
yes, that's
Okay.
that's all that I can think of.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, we have a couple of additional items here. We have the TAC charter changes.
So yes, as was brought to you all last year, there were some proposed changes to the TAC charter to more align with the bicycle advisory committee as well as the pedestrian advisory committee. We're still waiting to get more clarity on kind of how that will be aligned, but once we do have that, it will come back to the TAC. And And the second bullet item we have is the future hybrid meeting. I believe at the last TAC meeting, there was a question in regards to, or the possibilities of doing a hybrid meeting or several hybrid meetings this calendar year. So suggesting to put out a doodle poll, which I will send to the entire TAC. And from that, we can gauge and provide the information via email on what dates potentially would work for everyone.
Okay. So Pierre, what questions do you plan to put out with that?
Oh, just one, there'll be two questions more likely, or just maybe one question. If we did have a hybrid meeting, what particular TAC meeting would be the most ideal, or meetings would be the most ideal? We do have the July meeting where we have to meet in person as far as the Transit Capital Products Tour. But there was interest, at least noting there was some interest that if there was an opportunity to do an in-person meeting or a hybrid meeting, I should say, we should do so. And also just to see if there's any interest in doing so, because the last time, I believe, a year or so ago, we did this, it wasn't much interest. So just wanted to gauge where the tax would stand for this.
Okay, good. I'm going to suggest maybe the choices be no hybrid, one hybrid, or other. Would that make sense?
Yes, I could set it up that way. That's fine.
Okay. All right. Any other items that anybody would like to bring up on the committee? Okay, if not, I appreciate everybody participating tonight. And so our next meeting will be on March 14th.
I was just going to say for the changes to suggest trying it one time before instituting a permanent joint meetings.
Okay. Well, it's permanent, hybrid meetings. And Pierre, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things in the TAC charter change would be about having a joint meeting with the other two advisory committees once a year. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Right. So the suggestion is to kind of try that once before instituting a permanent meeting every year.
Okay, we can certainly consider that. All right, any other comments? If not, we'll look forward to seeing everybody in March. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.